Something has to happen in the Middle East, and soon. And here to talk about events in the Middle East is White House correspondent and credentialed Washington reporter, Bill Koenig. Hi, Bill.
Hi, Gary.
Right now, let's talk about something that's near and dear to your heart. That is the nation Israel and its relationship to Washington politics, because that's where you live, basically. That is the thing that you watch.
Well, what's interesting is the United States presidents have been involved in the Land for Peace process, which he birthed in Madrid in '91. The United States has been the broker that both sides respects and trusts.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, Gary, as I've documented over and over again, and we've talked about in your program before, that this is covenant land. This is land that God gave to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and their descendants. It's Judea, Samaria, and East Jerusalem. And God did not intend for that land to be an Arab state. And our presidents, well-meaning, and I think most international leaders are well-meaning to the extent that they would like to see Israel live in peace and security. The problem is Israel's so-called peace partners want to destroy Israel, as these nations in the Middle East have wanted to do for many, many years and have attempted in the past. So we have a very interesting situation in Washington. We have a Congress that is overwhelmingly supportive of Israel. We have a White House that's been in charge of the Land for Peace negotiations. We've got a State Department that is filled with a lot of pro-Arab people that make it difficult at times for the White House to do anything in the Middle East, and especially when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian situation. And I remember during President Bush's time, people would say, well, who's in charge here? Is the White House in charge? Or is it the State Department? And just recently, a couple of weeks ago, they were talking about $75 million that, I'm sorry, I think it was $57 million that the State Department says that's over and above the Obama agreement they had with Israel. We need to get that money back. And Trump said, no, we're not going to require that money to come back. So, this is another example of the tension that we have in Washington when it comes to Israel's land. And most people in Congress, or the Congress, has pretty much accepted the two-state vision anyhow, because of the influence of George W. Bush when he was president, along with Ariel Sharon's letter of agreement in April 2004. But nonetheless, Gary, we are Israel's best friend. We arguably have a President Trump that's a better friend than Israel's ever had.
Bill, and you're very well aware of this, but for our viewers' sake, I want to review this because Israel has a history of receiving a land grant in the modern era. Back in the 20th century, Israel was given a large land grant, and then under various conferences, it got smaller and smaller and smaller. Originally, Israel had the land called Transjordan, and that got smaller and smaller, and Israel was, in the end, a very thin sliver of ground.
Let me this is interesting, I think you'll find this interesting, is the Balfour Agreement, the British Balfour Agreement. Lord Balfour, who was a high official in the government of Britain, wanted to give all that land as a Christian to Israel. But through conferences and the League of Nations and the United Nations, they eventually just kept carving and carving and carving. What's interesting today, at the time of the Balfour Agreement, there was a saying, the sun never sets in the British Empire.
Yeah.
They had massive possessions all over the world.
They did.
The same percentage of land that they reneged on to Israel, the future state of Israel, is the same percentage of land they no longer occupy.
Wow.
And that was an enormous amount of land.
And God says very clearly in the Bible, I'll bless those who bless you, and I'll curse those who curse you.
Another example, a very significant example.
And I know of one Messianic rabbi, a very well-known gentleman, very bright, and follows Israeli history like you can't believe. And he calls that curse for curse in kind. He's written a book about it. And what he says is that what you do to Israel will be done to you. And that's a covenantal relationship. And if you try to destroy Israel, you're going to be destroyed. Just as simple as that.
Yeah, it's almost on the eye for eye type mentality, which we don't follow so much. But I agree with that. I see that pattern. It's a very, because, when we pressure Israel to divide their land, we have enormous catastrophes that happen. As I've said in previous tapings, the greater the pressure in Israel, the greater the corresponding catastrophe. So it fits along the lines of what he was saying.
I have my Bible open to Genesis 13, verse 14. And the Lord said unto Abram, after Lot was separated from him, lift up now thine eyes, and look from the place where thou art, northward, southward, eastward, westward. And I'm not going to read the rest of it, but God told Abraham, stand up and look in four directions, and everything your eyes see, that's yours. And it was a high place that Abraham was standing. He could see the Mediterranean. He could see the mountains to the east. He could see to the far north. He could see to the south. And you can go to Israel today and stand pretty much where Abram stood.
Oh, yes.
And you can look and see what he saw. And that is an exciting thing to do.
You can see the high rises of Tel Aviv or Ashdod or Ashkelon, or even the smokestack there in Caesarea. Or you can look in the other direction, east, you can see the mountains of Jordan.
Yeah.
And you can see the Dead Sea at times as well.
Sure.
It is remarkable. And it's not a very large country. It's the size of the state of New Jersey. But isn't it amazing, Gary, that this is the center of God's redemptive plan for the nations of the world? That almost every major world leader has had an involvement at some point, in some stage, in some degree, on attempting to bring a peace deal to Israel and giving the Palestinians an Arab state in the biblical heartland of Israel.
Yeah. The measure of the man is his relationship with Israel, I think. You're going to go down in history by the way that you addressed Israel.
And also the understanding of the Word. We are so blessed, Gary. I mean, we've talked about it before. That Genesis to Revelation is God's Word. And that 27% of the Bible, which is Bible prophecy, is as relevant today as it has ever been. Matter of fact, we're watching it play out right before our eyes. So it is significant. And fortunately, we have the eyes to see and ears to hear and understand the significance of the days we live in.
The book is called Eye to Eye. This is the expanded version. How many pages? It's
576.
All right. And this book is arranged in such a way that it takes incidents that have occurred and the political, military interaction with those incidents of nature, and you make a very, very good case that the covenant of blessing and cursing is still quite in operation. God's still blessing those who bless Israel and still cursing those who curse Israel. And I think you make it as clear as it's possible to make it.
These are good examples. And also, Gary, we have many friends, as well as ourselves, that have been supportive of the state of Israel and have been greatly blessed, by the work that we do in our ministries, in our personal lives, and in the friendship and relationships we've been able to develop in Israel over the years. So we've had much blessing.
And you know as well as I do that if you make a friend in Israel, you make a friend.
You do.
They really appreciate who they are. That is, they have a sense of self unlike anything I've ever seen before. They talk about each man building his house, raising his family, establishing his own vineyard and his own shade trees. And the idea of this covenantal tie with the land is a very real thing to modern Israelis.
It is, and Israel knows, the Jewish people in Israel more and more know who their friends are. They had a pretty rough go during the Holocaust, obviously, due to the Catholics and Protestants. It was not a good experience. But the people of Israel are very appreciative of evangelical support for the nation of Israel. They know that without us, they would not have any, if any, friends in the world. So this relationship that's getting stronger and more developed is very special to watch come to fruition in a very significant way. And they are true. Gary, you put it well. I mean, they are very, very good friends, true friends, and would do anything in the world for you.
Absolutely. Now, let's talk about the book. The thesis of the book is that those who mistreat modern Israel are going to be judged. And by the way, rather quickly, not in the far future, but sometimes on the same day they make a pronouncement. Give us 2 or 3 examples of that.
Well, I think the major events, perfect storm, sending 30-foot waves into President Bush's home in Maine at the time in October 91 when he was calling on Israel to give up the West Bank, which is Judea and Samaria.
Wow.
9/11, 17 days before 9/11, President Bush was dealing with Crown Prince Abdullah on what was going to be the most comprehensive address ever given to the UN. He was going to call for 2 states. They finished the work on 9/10 and 9/11 happened. The God of Israel did not produce that disaster. He didn't stop it. Katrina happened immediately within a couple hours of President Bush congratulating Ariel Sharon for having overseen the eviction of 9,500 Jews from their homes and businesses and synagogues in Israel.
Yeah.
And immediately that storm started. And major tornado outbreaks during Obama's 2011, Joplin, the Alabama. I mean, this is the year 2011 when he was very actively involved in the peace process was one of the most costly catastrophe years in history. And then recently, Hurricane Harvey. Kushner had been over in Israel and the Middle East. He started in the Middle East, going to Doha, Jeddah, Abu Dhabi, Amman, and Cairo, trying to get their support for a peace process with Israel. In terms, we'll stand with you militarily against Iran. And then he went to Israel. The day that he landed in Israel is the day that Hurricane Harvey, which was all but gone for 3.5 days, no advisories, reformed, became a tropical storm. The next day when he met with Netanyahu and Abbas, it became a major Category 4 hurricane and then came ashore. The connections with what he was doing in Israel and the Middle East at the time of Harvey's reformation and disaster was enormous.
Now, you may be listening to Bill and saying, that sounds far-fetched. That can't be happening. That really, things don't happen that way. And Bill would beg to differ, and he's documented his hypothesis to the extent that you're going to have a hard time refuting it, because how long have you been taking notes like this?
Well, Gary, the book has 26 years of events. And according to NOAA, there has been $171 billion events, catastrophes, since the Madrid Land for Peace Conference began in 91. I have 127 in the book.
Wow.
And over 100 of those are billion-dollar events. So over 60% of the major catastrophes, the record-setting, that's a key here. There are record-setting catastrophes that happen in America have a connection to U.S. pressure in Israel to divide their land. So the probability is off the chart.
You know, Psalm 122, I think it's verse 6, is very well known, and you hear it all the time. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. They shall prosper that love thee. It's true.
It is.
If you love Israel, you're going to prosper. How simple can you get?
And we're praying for the Messiah, that Psalm 122:6, and also come quickly, Lord Jesus. I mean, we're living in the time when we're going to, I can't imagine us not seeing the Messiah, Yeshua's return. All the signs are about us.
On a recent trip, Prophecy Watchers went to Israel, and we did some video. In fact, we've got a little video called "Join Us in Jerusalem." It's kind of a little home movie style record of our trip, so you can see where we went, what we did. I stood not very far from the Temple Mount at one point, about lunchtime, and tourists were, as you know, you've been there, tourists are everywhere, and I went there to see Israel, but at that moment in time, I was busy watching tourists. There were hundreds of them, and you could hear them, the languages. I could hear every language on earth. I saw Orientals. I saw people from Mongolia. I heard people with Australian accent. I mean, it's like nothing I've ever seen before. People come to Jerusalem.
Exciting.
Because they want to experience something there. They know there's something there.
Believers from all over the world.
It's
It's so exciting to be there.
We
love Jerusalem. It's a very special place for many reasons.
Yeah. And by the way, Bill has also put together a video. It's called Eye to Eye as well. And what are people going to see when they look at this?
Well, it's a DVD that highlights events and catastrophes during George Herbert Walker's time in office, Bill Clinton's 2 terms, and then about 30 minutes of George W. Bush events, one event after another of major significance. and about 30 minutes of, a little less than 30 minutes of Obama's events through 2015. One event after another. It's a little over an hour of these events that I talk about in the book where you can see it visually. And it's, you know, it's impactful.
Now, I've come to a point that I've been waiting for a while, but I've got to ask you a question because you sort of circulate in high places. You're around the White House and around national reporters, and you hear things and see things. What, in your opinion, is going to be happening that we should watch for concerning Israel, say, in the next few months?
Well, that's a good question, Gary. I think we have a president that has a defense team in place that fully understands the number one threat in the Middle East right now is Iran. We have General Mattis, General Dunford, Mike Pompeo, CIA director, Mike Pence is vice president. General McMaster's national security advisor. They fully understand the number one threat in the Middle East is Iran, and they will call it that, as well as the Secretary of State Tillerson. And so President Trump is developing this Sunni coalition. He went to Riyadh in May. I was with him in Jerusalem, but I wasn't in the Riyadh part of the trip. But what was important about that trip, his son-in-law Kushner arranged for President Trump to speak to the leaders of 50 Muslim countries. So what we saw here is this really, on the surface, a brilliant plan of, okay, Saudis, okay, Kuwait, okay, Oman, okay, Qatar, we will back you against your major threat here. But we want to see you normalize relationships with Israel, and we're going to have Israel give up land for this comprehensive Middle East peace deal. That's been the rebuke that we've seen in Harvey and Irma, because their activities have been corresponding to those events.
And I've got to ask you, this seems interesting to me. Time and time again, land for peace. Give up a little land and everything will be okay. We'll just sign a few covenants here and everybody will live happily ever after. And that doesn't happen.
No.
And yet the old habit will not die. They're around.
Well, it's like doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result.
Exactly.
You know, and here we have a deal. A president loves making deals, Gary. You know,
Absolutely.
he's the consummate deal maker.
Right.
Well, first of all, this is a different Middle East than putting a large building together, a hotel or an office building. But the other thing is, I really think his plan on the surface is pretty clever. It's pretty bright. It's a very intriguing way of looking at it. Sunnis will be with you. We'll back you as long as you do things right, as long as you don't sponsor terrorism. You got a friend. You didn't have that with Obama. But we want you to normalize relationships with Israel. We got all these Jewish people, Kushner and David Friedman, who's the ambassador, and Jason Greenblatt, and all these people in my administration. We want to all live together, and we want to come up with this comprehensive Middle East peace plan. And Israel's agreeing through Netanyahu to give up land to create this state as part of the comprehensive deal. I think Abbas and Arafat turned down incredibly attractive deals. They were very good deals, very attractive. But I think what's going to happen here, Gary, is these Sunni countries are going to tell Abbas, this is the way it's going to be, and you're going to take it this way. And if you don't, forget it. We're finished with you. Wow. I think they're going to reverse the pressure to the extent that they're going to tell Abbas how he's going to do the deal. So, because people are just saying, why the violent reaction to Hurricane Harvey and Irma? I mean, these so unusual to have. We've never had two Category 4s together in the same year, and we've never had two that completely inundated massive amount of real estate. The God of Israel does not like the Trump plan. I mean, that's the way I look at it, based on history, based on the 127 events that I've documented, Gary. So I think that, here's the bottom line. The U.S., our presidents have had a prophetic role, and every president has had a role in accelerating final day events, and Trump is going to be the one that's going to have to make some serious decisions about Iran and Syria, Lebanon, Russia, and with Israel that could accelerate those final day events that you talk about frequently, and I do as well.
And so what you're looking for is a different kind of negotiation.
Oh, absolutely.
Than has been going on in the past.
Yeah, this is going to be outside the box. This is good thinking in the natural. But we know the land of Israel cannot be included with that because they have no right to give up that land. Or no earthly leader has the right to divide that land. So it's going to be very interesting to see the reaction. But I know that Trump is committed.
And eye to eye links or puts a very credible connection between meteorological conditions.
Right. Absolutely.
And by the way, serious ones, and the way we relate to Israel. You know, it's as you were talking, I thought about Job 38 because Job goes through all of the testing that he goes through, and in the end, God speaks to him. And at one point, he says to him, and I wish I could quote it, but I can paraphrase it. God says to Job, you know, basically, I control the weather. And he says, I have stored up the hail in the clouds for the day of judgment. And God goes on at some length to explain to Job that he uses the weather in judgment. And I was thinking about that as you were talking. It's not a far-fetched idea. It's a very, very believable idea.
Yeah, he's used it throughout history, even to protect his people.
Yeah.
Even in our country, he's used weather at some very interesting times during our wars.
Oh, yeah. Bringing in clouds, and airplanes were unable to bomb at certain times.
Yeah.
And then suddenly the clouds would clear at a key moment.
Absolutely.
And those things are thought to be miraculous by the troops at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even back to during some of our ancient, our War of Independence.
Yes.
Washington, D.C., how the weather was maneuvered for God's plan for a nation, the new nation. So who's one of the great friends of the state of Israel? That's why we've been blessed, Gary. You talk about Genesis 12:3.
Yeah.
America has been greatly blessed because we are a financial supporter of Israel, which we receive a lot back from that finance. We get a lot of blessing back from them. But we have been a great friend of Israel, and we have been blessed, and our Congress is overwhelmingly supportive of Israel. And all that's good. But again, that land is not to be divided.
And once again, we're talking with Bill Koenig, author of Eye to Eye, the expanded edition. His thesis, if you haven't run into it before, you might say, well, wait a minute, I don't know whether I can believe that or not. Read the book. It's documentary in nature, and it's laid out in such a way that you can just very carefully and easily follow events that are timed with historical encounters relative to the nation Israel. What an idea. And I appreciate your book a lot.
Thank you, Gary.
At this moment in time, let me just say that you can obtain this new book. And along with this DVD called Eye to Eye, and as we do here at Prophecy Watchers, we put things together in packages. We also have another of Bill's books called Revealed, Obama's Legacy. And I noticed it has a kind of dark clouds on the cover, probably on purpose. He was not a friend of Israel.
Correct.
And you document a number of events, and you'll be quite interested in reading this. We are putting these three books together and calling them the Eye to Eye package, yours for a gift of $50 to Prophecy Watchers. By the way, the book, the DVD, and Revealed go together to kind of give you a composite idea of Bill's thinking. It's revolutionary, but it's also common sense if you believe what's written in the Bible. By the way, we're going to add to this package, absolutely free, the little DVD I was talking to you about a minute ago, our trip to Israel. Prophecy Watchers ventured there, and it was an amazing trip called Join Us in Jerusalem. The three books, the DVD, for your gift of $50. By the way, you've got the 800 number on your screen right now, or you can go to prophecywatchers.com, scroll down to Bill Koenig, the Eye to Eye package in our online bookstore, and you'll find this package listed, and you can click on that and order the books for yourself. We've got about 3 or 4 minutes here, and I've got so many questions, But the thing that's rotating around in my mind over and over again is we believe that the exposition of Bible prophecy will bring people to Christ. If someone really and truly believes that God is acting in the world today, God is not living on some distant galaxy. He's not remote. He's active in the world today. And your book is based on that idea. Mm-hmm. I think if someone really believes that and they don't have a relationship with God, the living God through Jesus Christ, they will be motivated to look again and say, wait a minute, if this is true, I need to give my life to Christ. And let's talk about that a minute.
Yeah, that's very important. I've had a chance to talk about Bible prophecy with 5 Washington White House correspondents. They're from the Middle East. And, using Jerusalem, using Israel, using their countries has been so easy for me, Gary, to give them a gospel message. And I think that we all have opportunities today when more and more of these events, people are going to start saying, what's going on?
Yeah.
They're starting to already with Irma and Harvey, the major earthquake, the 8.1, the largest in a century, just off the Mexican coast. They're sensing in their spirit that these are not normal times.
Right.
This is going to be a great opportunity for us to share the gospel, and I think we need to capture this moment like never before and be ready, because God is going to give us opportunities to help people better understand these times. A fair amount of people are just tuning out completely right now because they're tired of what they're seeing in Washington. And that, in some ways I don't blame them. In other ways, they need to stay informed because a lot of stuff's going on right now that's going to impact them, their family, and their future. But with all that said, God allows times like this and what we may be going into for the purpose of bringing more people to Jesus as their Lord and Savior. And we have to acknowledge that, understand that, and seize the moment when we've been given that opportunity to share Jesus.
And if you're watching, listening to Bill right now, and it has dawned on you for the very first time that God has a covenantal relationship with his holy people in the nation of Israel, which, by the way, means that God is alive and well and doing exactly what he promised he would do, you need to get on God's side. How do you do that? Well, you receive the absolutely free gift of salvation through the finished work of the Lord Jesus Christ. And there you are. And Bill, if you want to say a word, you've got a few seconds to do so.
Well, what's exciting is God's redemptive plan for the nations starts with the city of Jerusalem. And because of that tiny little country that everybody wants to tell them how to run their business and how to live, many Muslims, Hindus, agnostics, atheists, Buddhists are going to come to understand that Jesus Christ is their only hope, as well as Jewish people will come to understand that their hope is in Jesus.
Bill Koenig, thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bill Koenig's book is worth reading. It's called Eye to Eye, and I told you how you could order it, and I hope you do so. I'm Gary Stearman. You keep watching. We are. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com, where you can sign up for our free email newsletter. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.